recorder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says recording. It says recording.
Eso está bien así. Record.
No, this
¿Cuántas
is
baterías tiene ahí? Oh, shit.
it's 100%.
I guess the video card is
I gotta go this way because you can see my face.
Ah, yo creo que él le bajó, fue. Él bajó la cámara. No, y la verdad es que cuando estaba hablando con ella, se tomó ahí.
Just push it up just a little bit.
La tenía que
So the
hacer.
TV.
Let me know.
A subirla, pero de hecho, arriba.
Ajá, ajá. Right there, right there, right there. No, es que yo me veo.
I'm a cameraman. I'm a cameraman now.
Dije, dije. No.
Hey, yo quería decir que esos son mis
¿Viste? El escuadra se está portando mal.
September 14.
September 14th.
Ese día vamos a Washington y bueno, nosotros estamos en la. No, en serio. La de la pelea, a beber y ya comemos, sí. A beber y a comer.
A bebé no.
Uno bebe, uno bebe.
I drank when I went to the concert a little bit, and I was like, what, David? I should drink so you can see how it is.
I am going to, while we have some technical challenges, I'm going to allow this incredible panel to start to introduce themselves as we kick off the last, and we'll let Jeanette go last. So I'm going to have to invite Roger and Maria, if you guys want to step into the camera. So we're excited to kick off the next panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. You'll get a feel for where this is heading today, and I'm looking at Sandra right now, and I'm going to slow down. So thank you.
Hi, apparently I'm the gentleman in the back, just so everybody just already been identified as. I'm Roger Williams. I've been interpreting for 50 years. So I started a long time ago. We won't say how old I was when I started, because then that would give away how old I am now. But I wasn't 6. We'll just leave it at that. I have worked mostly in mental health. I'm also a social worker. I'm also a parent of 4 deaf children. My wife is deaf, and I was the director of mental health services for deaf. But now I'm retired, haha. And so I'm only working like 20 or 30 hours, and most of that is interpreting in either court or legal systems and sometimes medicine. So, ta-da!
Hola. Bonjour. Buongiorno. What other languages were there?
Ni hao.
Ni hao. Salam alaikum. Negative. So my name is Maria. Sorry, I'm like, what am I saying? My name is Maria Francisco Monteso, and I was born and raised in Spain. But I teach in USC Upstate, the only minor in the whole state of South Carolina in translation and interpreting studies, specifically in Spanish translation, Spanish-English translation and interpreting. You talking to me? No, sorry. Oh. Okay, and so I'm also the assistant director of El Centro Latino, which is the only academic center in the whole state of South Carolina also that studies Latino community, and the only center that is academic based that do that. So you have some posters on the table, some cards. If you ever want to come to one of our events in USC Upstate Spartanburg, you're very welcome. There's also my email there, and the email of the director of the center, El Centro. And I would love to see you there, and I would love to talk to you about my passion today, which is translation and interpreting studies. And a lot of differences that sometimes, and little things that we confuse sometimes. So, gracias.
I'm Jeanette.
And she's Jeanette.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Houchins. I am the president
training. I am a certified medical interpreter, a certified court interpreter, a certified translator, and I've been doing this for more than 20 years. And I'm very passionate about language access and communication, and I feel like that is why we're here today, to make sure that we understand that effective communication is more than just words. There is a lot more going on there. So that's me.
And while they're busy doing high level
Of course,
work
we don't
here,
know anything.
I wanted to, so obviously, as you now know, this panel is really going to talk with us a little bit about what it means to do professional interpretation and translation, and sort of on a visioning. So it's like this upstate team, but I wanted to sort of let you guys know about sort of like perhaps next step visions for while you're being introduced, especially to Maria. But again, USC Upstate is the only formal academic program in the state of South Carolina that has a minor in interpretation and translation for both the foreign language, and that's Maria's area of expertise, but also for American Sign Language. So I think that we are really excited about a potential partnership with USC Upstate about sort of grounding the work and enhancing the profession of interpretation and translation. But even more exciting, Maria, her research and her passion is expanding quality language services in other social service settings, not only in court, of course, which is important, and Jeanette and Roger and Maria also work on court interpretation. But Maria actually kicked off, she hosts a summer training around language access in educational settings. And that was sort of, yes,
for saying all that.
yeah. So when I saw that Maria was offering this summer sort of intensive for bilingual and multilingual professionals who are working in school systems, and to expand access in that environment, of course, which is incredibly important, that led to this aha moment of saying, you deserve that same support and respect in law enforcement and victim services. So I just wanted to thank having Maria come into South Carolina and this team in the upstate really working on expanding education for not only interpreters, and you'll hear about that in a minute, but also for bilingual and multilingual professionals working in all kinds of settings. So I just wanted to sort of share with you all that vision, and our goal of having you all today is to sort of actually help Maria and USC Upstate make the case that there are students out there, that there are people and professionals who need the support, so that this gives us the opportunity, today, you all being here, gives us the opportunity to really think strategically about funding and time and training that you all think you want and you think is necessary to do your work better and encourage others in the work. So I just wanted to take that moment to for a little commercial. She might not have shared all of that, but you'll hear again what they're all doing now. But so they've asked me to moderate this panel. So I think you're ready. You guys ready now? Okay. So we're gonna work through this. So the first question we want to talk about is, how do any of us decide? I mean, you heard from Rebecca this morning that you are a certified interpreter in court, or what is it? Otherwise qualified. What does that mean to you? And how do we know whether someone is qualified?
Well, for me, the first thing that we typically do when we hire staff is I'm in sign language, so we have a sign language proficiency interview. So we make, if they're not certified as an interpreter, because I'm certified as an interpreter, but I also have a sign language proficiency interview, which is a different thing, because as we'll talk about, knowing sign language doesn't mean that you're an interpreter, although hopefully, if you're an interpreter, it does mean that you know sign language. So we have staff who are sign language competent but not interpreters. But the way we decide that is we give them a test, and then we get a score, and we make decisions based on that.
So to me, someone that is qualified, if I had to hire someone, the first thing I would ask or check on their resume is some academic background in translation or interpreting. The thing is that, like I said earlier, in South Carolina, there's only one minor in Spanish, translation and interpreting. So it's like, okay, you want a qualified interpreter, you want a trained interpreter, but we only have one minor in this whole state. So we need to make changes in academia. They don't listen to me. I've been fighting for this for years. Sorry. I work for USC Upstate again. Okay. And it's not just that university, but in general, because if it's the only one that we have in the whole state, there's an issue. So we need your voices too. And later I'm gonna share with you the chancellor's email. So if you want to send a couple of words with what it means to you to have something bigger, support, resources that we need, because I cannot just do everything just myself, at least in Spanish, right? We need more languages too. So I'm just trying to say here, for me, someone that is qualified and even more than certified would be someone that has academic training. I think it's essential because translation and interpreting, it's a profession, it's a science, and it's more than just being bilingual. And we will talk about that later, I guess. Sí, because I talk, and no.
So for me, I do hire people. So it is important to have, because there are so many different languages, and just as Maria mentioned, in the US it's very difficult to find education for interpreters, like a bachelor's degree for interpretation, and with so many different languages, to find something specific for those languages is even harder. We need to do language proficiency tests, and we will talk about that as well, to know what level of language proficiency someone has. And the level that is required to interpret is a really high level. We also check for any education that they have. Some people come from other countries where actually there are degrees in interpretation and translation. Maria is one of those. And we also check for certifications. For Spanish, there are a few more resources than for other spoken languages. And we have course certification, we have medical certification, and so we do check for those fields in which there is certification if people have those credentials. Experience is also important, but we also have to do training, and we also have to do evaluations to see if they really have the skills that they need to be interpreters.
So obviously, we're here talking about language access in two particular fields. So if somebody's qualified to interpret in one field, what is their ability to move and interpret or translate in another field?
As I said, my specialty started out as mental health. So I'm certified as a mental health interpreter, which is on top of being certified as sort of general practice interpreter. So I really focus narrowly in that area. But there are things I know nothing about. I had to go interpret for a heating and air conditioning class because the regular interpreter was out sick. Now you might think that's not complicated. Apparently I hooked up the furnace to the exhaust of a car or something. I don't know what I did, but the deaf person was looking at me like, and I'm like, and he's like, oh, no. So, even though I'm qualified to interpret, that doesn't mean I can interpret in anything. So I specialize in, as I said, court and medical work and mental health, but there are lots of things that I'm not. So it's a combination of training, but it's also a combination of experience. As an interpreter, I have to continue to take continuing education. I've got to do so many hours every year. So, and I do it in the specialties, but you can't be a specialist in everything.
Yes, even if bilingual people or translators and interpreters, even if they are certified, we are not dictionaries with legs. Like, it's impossible to know absolutely everything of all kind of fields. And sorry. That's the way I talk. Sorry. And so In my case, for instance, I would say maybe 1 or 2 fields of expertise, that would be more than enough. Maybe some people can have 3, but me, I'm accredited, I'm certified interpreter and translator, and I know nothing about industrial electronics or computer science. If they ask me to interpret in a situation like that, I hear words, and maybe I understand the words separately, but together I wouldn't be able to interpret, because I don't know anything about that field. So sometimes they have called me from court, because they need interpreters, a lot of interpreters in court, and I say no, even though I need the money, but I cannot do it, because I know very little about the American court system. Even in my country, I know very little about it. I don't know much terminology, and I already work for the medical and educational system as an interpreter in schools. So I'm not going to get into a field where I'm not going to give you quality, 100% quality, and representing my community and my language the way I want it to be represented, right?
And to that, I will add that that is a challenge as well, because we have, as I was mentioning, other languages other than Spanish. So if we have one Arabic interpreter, and that's the only interpreter that we have in an entire county, and we need medical, educational, court, and everything, it's very difficult. Not only we don't have general training for interpreters, but then we have to move into that specific language, and then into all the different specialties. So that really creates a big challenge. But it is really something that with education and practice, we learn where and where we cannot interpret that. Yes.
Quick question. Carl Powell, Jackson County Sheriff's Department. Is there a certification process for someone to interpret in Chu or in Mao? For somebody to be able to come down to do an FI or help in court?
Well, actually, that's a good question, and I actually have somebody.
Please repeat the question.
If there is a certification for someone that speaks Chu or Hmong to interpret, to come here and interpret. And I think actually that question will be answered better by one of our guests. Maria, would you like to answer that question?
Hi, everyone. I am another one of the Marias. It's a very famous name. I am a medical Spanish and Chu interpreter, and a certified immigration court Spanish and Chu interpreter. For this language and most of the Mayan languages, there is no certification except for medical, which was just launched by CCHI last year, and I am the first interpreter who became certified this year. In our country, there is no education or certification in any of these languages, so it's kind of a long process for the certification. For the medical, it consists more of interpreting letters of recommendations, doing some type of proficiency test. With immigration, you take just like a Spanish and oral and mostly oral test. And the way they do it for immigration for these languages is that they send the recordings to the university in Guatemala City, where it's evaluated by native speakers that understand the language, and that's how they get the results and score. So that is the only two that I know of. Everywhere else, it's more as a qualified, or it's depending on the experience, backgrounds, and your experience in children. So that's pretty much it that exists for the, and that's for pretty much all of the indigenous languages.
Thank you.
I'd also add the same for non-American Sign Language. You may have somebody who uses, one of my daughters uses Chinese Sign Language. If you happen to have contact with her from a law enforcement, you are stuck because the only person who knows it in the state is me, and I can't interpret for my daughter. So you just have to let her go, I guess. I don't know. Don't tell her that. She signs American now, but there are no certification processes for most of the foreign sign languages in the United States. And even often in their home countries, they don't have those either. So.
Thank you. So the title of today's training was the words that we are using today is we keep using this term bilingual, and most everyone in this room is considers themselves bilingual in some level of competency. And so I wanted to hear from you guys, more from a sort of academic and professional standpoint, like what does being bilingual or multilingual really mean?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a class. Since I'm a teacher, professor, what is the difference? Because sometimes we tend to confuse that a lot. Someone that is bilingual may have limited fluency in one language. Like I said, even me being certified and accredited, I cannot interpret in all the fields. So imagine a bilingual person, and imagine a bilingual that is not even 20 years old, that it's a kid that sometimes they have to interpret for their parents. What do they know? How they can interpret a session with their teachers or the school, right? Interpreters should be fluent in both languages, right? The bilingual person tries to solve client's problem, advocates for the client, gives own opinion, speaks for the participants. The interpreter never do that, okay? We allow the parties to communicate as directly as possible, may identify cultural differences, and inform both parties of these differences. There's a big difference, okay, between both of them. The bilingual person, individual, is probably unaware of ethical practices and professional conduct. The interpreter follows the professional conduct, obviously. The bilingual person may not prepare to handle the information in the interview, may leave out information that is not understood or deemed as unimportant. The interpreter is knowledgeable about terminology and procedures, ask for clarification as needed, and does never guess or leave out information. Because you're the voice of that person that is speaking. You never leave out absolutely anything, and you speak as accurately as possible. The bilingual person, usually they have no training in message processing or retention. The interpreter, you have trained on that, obviously, to retain and process the information. A bilingual person, a family member may be constrained by certain factors, that's why you're gonna do it for your daughter, and not reveal true symptoms or concerns, or maybe more concerned about personal viewpoints than those of others. The interpreter provides accurate information about the interpreting process and the cross-cultural interview. Educates participants briefly, very important, about using an interpreter. So usually, if you have a certified interpreter, someone that is qualified, they should let you know before they start the session how they work and how they're going to manage the session. There's a really big difference between being bilingual and being a professional interpreter, right?
Right. You are right. Another part of bilingualism is that there are different levels of bilingualism. So not everybody has a level of language that will allow them to interpret. Sometimes is limited to home conversations. In my case, my oldest son is native speaker, but he doesn't have academic Spanish, which means that he has a limitation. His Spanish is probably high school level, so if he's trying to understand a conversation of a higher register, it's probably going to be difficult. There are going to be words that he is not going to understand. And also, we have different, in different fields, we have different words, and it's almost like they're their own language. So legally is their own language. Medical is their own language. So being bilingual is something that we need to evaluate and know which level of language you have, and that is what is going to allow you to know how much can you do with So can you ask them questions? Can you give them the Miranda rights? Can you do an interrogation? And that will allow you to know when you need a professional interpreter to actually help you through those processes.
And this last question will hopefully lead, and maybe I might want to come to the front just as we sort of transition for lunch and our discussion over lunch. But the last question I wanted you guys to ask, so the title of this training was, what is the difference between being a bilingual professional and an interpreter or translator? And of course, so the audience in this room are bilingual professionals, so you are doing a job, and you also happen to speak one or more languages. So you have those job duties. And then you're often asked to use the language skills in various settings, either to do your job directly or to help another person do their job. So that's sort of interesting. So I think we just wanted to sort of frame, like, what does it mean to you? So you guys are professional interpreters and translators. So, but what does it mean to you to sort of just simply be a professional who is also bilingual?
Yeah, as I said, I'm also a licensed social worker, so I'm a bilingual social worker. So that means that I do all the social work things either in English, very rarely. I never saw a hearing patient till about 10 years ago, and the first time I had to sit down across from them, I was like, I don't know how to start this conversation, because I've been doing it for 40 years with people who were deaf, but never with people who are hearing. So, but as a bilingual social worker, I can do all the tasks that I need to do. We have staff, I'm retired officially, but no, I'm not quite completely. But in my old job at the Department of Mental Health, we have staff who are bilingual, who can provide those direct services, but are not interpreters. So they can do their job because there's a huge difference between you thinking of something and figuring out how you're going to say it, which is what you do if you're bilingual. Whereas if I'm interpreting, somebody else has thought of that thing. And they might have said it differently than I would have said it if I was doing it myself. But I have to figure out how they would have said it if they spoke the language, and it would have been something I would never have said. So that's why even though you can be bilingual and do your job, but you can't interpret because you don't. We're all weird. We all have our own unique way of saying things and doing things. And as an interpreter, I have to be that other person. And that's the difference between me doing it for myself and sometimes I end up interpreting. I'll interpret for the psychiatrists, and sometimes it's hard for me to stay in that role and not want to suggest to them other things they should do. So trying to figure out where those boundaries are for me as an interpreter.
Sorry. No.
Just when Roger mentioned this, there is one thing that is also part of what we do as professional interpreters is that we are not emotionally attached to the situation, and that part allows us to interpret accurately. And so even in my case, that I'm a certified interpreter, if my mom doesn't speak English, if I go to her with her to an appointment, I will request an interpreter because I may know everything that they're saying, but I am not there as an interpreter. And if I try to interpret, it will interfere because I'm also the daughter. So if she says something that I don't agree with, I'll probably say, oh, no, that's not true. Or if she didn't take her medication, but she says, yes, I did, I will have to say something. So that is also something that may happen with bilingual staff, that if you are interpreting and you know something about the case, but you're interpreting for someone else and they lie, what do you do? But an interpreter, we are professional and we know that we just interpret what is there and there is no conflict. So that is a big part, it's a conflict of interest that can be there. So,
Yeah, just add the little thing and then we go for lunch. But even if you're bilingual, you shouldn't be put in a situation where you are someone else's voice, because it could be dangerous for you, dangerous for them, and again, being bilingual, it would be something you can help someone to find the bathrooms, or just you need to sign here, or just follow me and we will go somewhere, whatever you need to go. That would be fine for you to use your bilingualism, but when you are representing someone else's voice, you should not be put in a situation like that. There should be resources to hire someone to do that job for you. Let me give you just one example. Some years ago, I was in a very hard situation in court where I had a lawyer, and I was so nervous at that moment when I was in front of the judge, and I was blocked. When the judge was talking to me, I would hear words, but I couldn't put them together. My brain was just, and I had to answer yes or no, and I was like, yes. And the lawyer was like, I'm like, no, my brain couldn't really process the information. And that's when I realized that even myself, being a certified interpreter, not court interpreter, I should have asked for an interpreter, because I could not process the information. I was too nervous. There was a lot of things happening. So, no, even myself, yeah. Gracias.
One thing,
Una más.
when we talked about this, we actually did prepare. You might not know that, but we did. But when we talked about it ahead of time, one of the things that I know sometimes, and I think this is especially true for folks in law enforcement with the kind of the command hierarchy that you have, you may have a situation where your commanding officer says, well, you're bilingual, you go interpret. And now you're kind of stuck, because this is going to come as a shock to you, I know, but you're not encouraged to tell your commander no. They don't really like that. And so learning how to be that assertive. How many of you saw the footage several years ago of a sign language, somebody who said they had a deaf brother, and they were signing for the emergency management people, and they were supposed to say there's a monster storm coming, and they signed there's a bear hamburger soon, whatever that meant. But he was told by his boss to go interpret, and he was not qualified. And so I would encourage you to have this conversation before you get told. If you're not qualified to interpret, tell them you're not qualified to interpret now. Don't wait until there's an emergency, because then nobody thinks about it, and we just do what we have to do. So just a concern that we talked about, and I didn't want to not mention it.
Well, thank you all. You are going to hear from these three folks again. So I will, and at this point, thank you very much for that perspective. And I hope that that conversation will help you get your brains going, because Juana is going to come and talk to us about our lunch activity and lunch together. So I'm going to invite Juana Saavedra to come on up here from KC Police Department. And David, of course. Hey, well, I just wanted to give instructions before we broke for lunch. You guys are a team. So while they're coming up here, wanted to just say a huge thank you to Serve and Connect, that organization, and of course the financial support that they give to the Midlands and KC Police Department for the Si Se Puede interagency initiative on this topic. So Juana's the face of that right now. So, and she's going to tell us, she and David are going to talk to us about the next hour.
I don't think I can talk for an hour.
No, just what we're doing.
Oh, okay. Thank you all for being here, for taking your time on a Saturday to be here. So we do have lunch ready to go already. Like Tricia said, it is provided by Serve and Connect and the funds from Si Se Puede. And I will talk to you guys a little bit more about Si Se Puede. We are going to have you guys get your lunch first while we are doing the activity, in order for us to be able to do it in an orderly fashion. So we will start in the back, 2 rows. I'll have David tell you, since he has this.
yeah, and like I say, we're gonna do like a lunch and learn. We're gonna start with this table in an orderly fashion. And then we're gonna go in his 2 lines, and then you go back, and then this table, and then this table, and then after a few minutes of lunch and everything, we'll start the activities, okay? The restrooms are over here again. If you don't know, and if you need water, you let me know. Thank you very much.
The water's in the fridge.
It's in the refrigerator. Or you can go, mi casa, su casa. So,
we'll start with this side here.
This side.
I don't know about that. Yo puedo vender mi peripheral. Ustedes son pertenecientes, están hablando ahí ustedes en el teléfono. Pero ustedes no significan nada para el departamento de nosotros. That's what I gotta do, what I gotta do.
I'm gonna turn this off and then